Alright, so I figure it is about time to do kind of a response video. Because I've gotten a lot, especially in response to that last video I did about hell. And I think some people misunderstood the whole point of that video. The whole point of that video had nothing to do with promoting any particular view of hell or even saying that hell does exist or that God does exist for that point. I was just kind of putting a spin on that kind of atheist argument or whatever against Christianity. Oh, I couldn't believe in a God who would send people to hell. I used to kind of think that too, and as I've gotten older, I've kind of thought about it more, and I just realized like that argument is not that convincing to me. If anything, I kind of see it the other way. Um, I will talk more about like questions regarding the literal existence hell or the implications of that for like theology or divine nature or whatever. Maybe not in this video. I don't know. I'm going to see where it goes. I'm going to have to do a few response videos because I've gotten a flood of comments and I've been kind of busy. But I am going to try to get through several of them, especially the ones that are more substantial. Some of them are kind of repetitive, like different comments are essentially saying the same thing. So if I respond to several comments, I think I've responded to most of them. So this is cool because this guy actually left like kind of a 4-point response. And some of this reflects things I've seen in other comments too. He basically says, I have to comment on this. There are 3 different ways I want to approach you on this. 1, how can you, no matter how vile an act is, justify realistically any act which is finite being punished with a fate which is infinite? That hardly seems fair. Do you get where I'm coming from? And there's another reason it hardly seems fair, which leads me to, and he goes on to the next point. Let me deal with this one. I think I can deal with it quickly. Now, this is a common kind of objection to hell that I've heard from atheists and lots of other people. Keep in mind, for a period of several years, I identified as an atheist. And I was kind of one of these militant new atheist or whatever, like I was very happy to argue. I loved reading like Hitchens and Harris and all those, this whole argument, hell is immoral because it's an infinite punishment for finite crimes. It's really not, if you think about it. I mean, if you rape and murder a child, is that action not infinite in its consequences? I mean, that child is gone forever. You know what I'm saying? Um, let's leave out discussions of afterlife and stuff like that. I'm just saying, think of it from like a parent's point of view or whatever, and like your child is gone. Nothing can ever undo that act. That is final. That is an eternal action. The child is dead and is never coming back. Um, if a woman is raped or something, she will never be unraped. Like that damage is done. That scarring to her psyche and her emotional being and so on. And there's things so much more horrendous than that. And like I say, imagine someone. Now, I'm not talking even about someone who gets drunk and date rapes a girl or something, as terrible as that is. I'm asking you to imagine some of the worst people that have ever lived, people that have committed like mass torture and rape and genocide and like just like the greatest atrocities you can imagine, unrepentantly, and maybe doing these things over and over and over again. You get what I'm saying? So you can't conceive of there being a place of eternal punishment for those people at the very least. I'm not talking about going to hell for the eternity for the, crime of not believing in absurd dogmas without sufficient evidence. You get what I'm saying? I'm not a Christian fundamentalist here. You should know me better than that if you've watched any of my other videos. But this idea of, infinite punishment for finites, there are plenty of crimes that are infinite, that are eternal in their consequence. Like I say, I mean, murder is obviously one. I mean, rape is another one. Um, I was abused as a child, and no doubt, like my psyche is still scarred from that, right? That was an action that has eternal consequences. You get what I'm saying? So no, I don't really buy into this objection about oh hell is eternal punishment for finite crimes or whatever. I get that as an objection if it's to do with a Christian fundamentalist who's saying that God is just for sending someone to hell for eternity for the crime of not believing in absurd dogmas without justification, or for not accepting Jesus' gift of you know what I'm saying? I get all that, but you're talking to me here, so let's be real. Let me move on to the next point. So he also says forgiveness. If there's no forgiveness, then what is the point of being saved or redeemed? How can anyone be so bloodthirsty for punishment to those they hate, yet also forgive them? I'm thinking of all the parents I've seen forgive another human being who killed their child. You're either on the one side of the fence or the other. I'm just giving you these neutrally. But I feel these need to be brought to you to see what you'd say to them, which leads me to the last one. Now, here, notice how he ends. Um, he's kind of being neutral, but it's just like, okay, well, I've heard your arguments. I'm just throwing out objections. That's really all I was doing in the video. I heard this objection about, oh, I could never believe in a God who would send someone to hell and infinite punishment for finite crimes. And I was just saying, okay, I'm neutral on this because I'm not a Christian or anything. I don't even believe in hell literally. I'm just saying that, oh, okay, well, let me give some objections. Let me give another point of view, kind of like he's doing here. So I get it, man. Respect. But as far as forgiveness, I mean, I believe in forgiveness. But the other side of forgiveness is repentance. You forgive someone who says they're sorry, right? You forgive someone who repents. In other words, someone who says, you know what, that was wrong. I'm not going to do that anymore. I can change, right? I mean, that's like if, let's say I have a girlfriend and maybe things are kind of rocky between us, and, you know, like maybe she goes out with her friends, gets drunk, hooks up with some other guy or something. That's going to hurt me. I'm going to be mad. I might break up with her, probably would, but I don't know. I mean, if she like feels really bad about it, like she is genuinely sorry, and like she's like, no, no, I love you, like it was a mistake, it's just things were rough between us, and it's like you know what I'm saying? Like I might forgive her and stay with her. You know what I'm saying? Forgiveness is fine, but the other side of that is repentance. If Even if you buy into this turn the other cheek stuff, all right, you swing on me again, I'm knocking you the fuck out. You get me? So forgiveness has to go along with repentance. But, you know, he mentions parents forgiving someone for killing their child. I mean, I've heard of that kind of stuff, and in a way it's kind of touching because it's like, man, the power of forgiveness is really strong. But is this a situation where the person made a mistake, like after years in prison, like they really feel remorse for what they've done and, you know, they forgive them? Or is this like some asshole that's like, I'd do it again? And also, like, when the parents forgive this person, this might be that kind of thing where it's like, look, I'm not going to hold on to this like anger. So for myself, I'm going to forgive rather than poison myself with like just toxic anger and stuff. But you still want justice to be done, right? I mean, let's say this person is not repentant whatsoever. Are you going to say, oh, yes, I forgive them for murdering my child and maybe torture raping them to death or something like that? So I forgive them, therefore they don't need to be punished. They can be released back into society with no consequences, no punishment, so they can do it again and hurt someone else? That's immoral, right? A certain kind, there is a certain kind of forgiveness, if you want to call it that I would consider immoral and absolutely antithetical toward the divine will and absolute morality. So he goes on to the last one. How can you blame anyone who has ever done anything good or bad when it's all pre planned, pre programmed in a way because God is all knowing? Does that not make him responsible? Sure, free will, however. Think of how sick God must be for sick people to come from him. Think of how twisted a being like that has to be to willingly allow that child to be raped and watch it. There's a lot to unpack there. Now, I am not a determinist, so that question doesn't really apply to my view. Um, I would say that if we were all automatons and we don't have free will or something like that, then maybe you could say, yeah, it would be immoral to punish someone for doing something if they had no choice. I believe we do have moral culpability. Look, I mean, if you really want to get into like philosophical terms, I guess I'm a kind of compatibilist, but I'm somewhat of a libertarian when it comes to free will. But I think I don't want to get into that. That is the weeds right there. But he's also kind of conflating God's omniscience, inclusive of free knowledge, with God's absolute control, or like the negation of free will. I think it is philosophically sound to say, I'm not saying this is the way it is. I'm saying I don't think these two views are necessarily mutually exclusive. I think they can be compatible. I think you can reconcile the view that God has foreknowledge of the future with the view that humans have free will and moral responsibility. Um, this just isn't the video where I want to kind of parse that out and dissect it. So I'm not exactly giving this question a dodge. I'm just saying I kind of object to some of the presuppositions here because number one, I think even if you have the view that God has foreknowledge, number one, that doesn't necessarily negate free will and moral responsibility. And I don't believe that everything is pre-planned or predetermined. Um, so I'm going to leave that one alone. That's as much as I want to say on that for now. I have a feeling I'll probably get into some of those kind of questions again with some other comments. Let me go to the last one. This one is a little bit scattered. It's not as well organized as it could be, no offense to the commenter. But he says, I want to amend this with one last thing. And I get a kick out of this one because it shows contradiction in people who feel this way. You would punish someone like Hitler for all eternity? First of all, I gave Hitler only as an example. My view of Hitler and a lot of things in World War II are different from the mainstream. Let me just say that without going into too much depth. But or support it, but what about what you don't know? What about prevented harm? Meaning, let's say in another universe, Hitler was horribly tortured and malnourished as a child. You wouldn't care, would you? Sure, you may say he hasn't committed the acts in this reality, but it still exists somewhere. Are we talking about some kind of multiverse shit? I really don't want to go there right now. Um, oh, okay, okay. Let me get like to the end because I think he kind of makes this point here. So, do you see what I mean? We need vile acts to have things exactly as they are. It sucks to say that, but you wouldn't exist if some bad shit didn't happen. Yeah. I mean, let me kind of buy into a narrative that I don't particularly like or want to promote for a second. But let's just say, even though America is going downhill rapidly, there's no place on earth that I would have rather been born. Greatest country on earth, okay? And the United States of America would not exist. The world would not be what it is now, for better and worse, but I think largely for the better. If um, the Native Americans or whatever hadn't been pushed off their land, and all kinds of horrible things did happen, right? So, yeah, for things to be as they are, um, I mean, yeah, it's kind of a tangled mess, isn't it? But that doesn't absolve people of their moral responsibility. I mean, let me just give it, let's say, again, I'm kind of buying into a mainstream narrative. If you really want to get into my views, they'd be somewhat, nuanced. But let's just say that uh, a man and a woman met in a Nazi concentration camp and they fell in love and they had these like beautiful children or whatever. And okay, so are we going to say that the Holocaust is now justified simply because if that hadn't happened, these two people never would have met and fallen in love? So, I mean, they can certainly be grateful for the circumstance, not grateful for the circumstances necessarily, but they can look back and see how everything that happened, no matter how horrible, uh, that's what led them to each other. That's what, like, without all that, they wouldn't have met. Like, you get what I'm saying? But that doesn't absolve people of moral responsibility. So you can recognize that, yes, like the the current state of the universe is the product of everything that came before, both good and bad, both wonderful and awful. And I mean, likewise, there are probably some, like, heroic and noble actions without which some horrible thing couldn't have occurred. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you mentioned like Hitler as a baby, that whole kind of idea. I mean, let's just say that when Hitler was a baby or whatever, he was about to be run over by a train or something, and someone saw him on the tracks and like heroically saved him and maybe lost his own leg in the process or something. That was a heroic act that's worthy of praise, right? What a noble act of like courage and like self-sacrifice and so on to save this little innocent baby. Okay, but now because of that, 6 million Jews and all this stuff. So does that negate the heroism and the altruism of this individual? That no, of course not. And likewise, I mean, if someone does terrible, terrible things that causes massive suffering, things that are eternal in their consequence for millions of people, let's say, they are not absolved of their moral guilt simply because, some good managed to come out of that. So I hope that clarifies my view on that. Um, I am going to end this one here. I do plan to do several other videos, but I'm probably going to do like 1 or 2 comments per video. So I will get back to it, and I'm just drinking some beers tonight and catching up on my comments. So thanks for tuning in. More soon. Peace.